I trusted you both. You betrayed me. Now I decide what it costs. I'm 26 years old, living in Ohio, and I work full-time as a heavy equipment technician at Morrison Construction. It is a grueling, exhausting, oil-stained job, but it pays well, especially for someone who skipped the college route entirely. I've always been the type of guy to keep to myself, avoid unnecessary drama, work hard, and build a stable life with my own two hands. I never expected to be the center of something so completely insane, but here we are. At 23, I became a homeowner. I didn't inherit any money, and I didn't have any family help. I bought that house outright with money I scraped together from years of grinding construction jobs during high school and community college. For 5 straight years, I lived as cheaply as humanly possible. Roommates, cheap food, and a rust bucket Honda Civic were my norm. 60-hour work weeks were just another Tuesday for me. Eventually, all that sweat and discipline paid off. The property wasn't some luxury mansion, just a modest 3-bedroom place in a quiet area with a massive double garage that was absolutely perfect for working on engines. But the real win? No debt. No mortgage. Was mine. Fully paid off. While most of my peers were swimming in deep student loans or still living in their parents' basements, I had something solid to show for my hard work. The house was rough when I bought it. The previous owner was an older guy who hadn't done a single bit of upkeep in over a decade. Every single weekend I fixed it up myself. I laid down new hardwood floors, completely redid the electrical wiring, painted the walls, and cleared out the overgrown landscaping. By the time I was finished, I'd added at least $40,000 in pure equity value. I took pride in doing things right. As for my family, it's a small story, but it is heavily marked by pain. My dad, Robert, is 54. He started his own plumbing business, Chen's Plumbing, from nothing 2 decades ago. Back then he was just a guy with a beat-up, rusted van and a bucket of tools. Now he runs a massive crew of a dozen guys, owns a full commercial shop, and commands a fleet of service trucks. He's done incredibly well for himself, easily worth a couple $1 million. He cruises around town in a decked-out black F-150 King Ranch and lives in a massive luxury house right on Lake Erie with a private dock. He was, to everyone who knew him, the literal blueprint of the American dream. When I was 16, my mom, Sarah, passed away after a grueling 8-month battle with cancer. Watching her fade away while the medical bills piled up mountain high, even with our insurance, was the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. To afford her treatment, my dad had to sell our family home, and we downsized to a tiny, cramped apartment. She fought with everything she had, but cancer doesn't care how strong or good a person is. Losing her during my junior year of high school completely broke me. For a long time afterward, it was just me and my dad. We got incredibly close because we didn't have any other choice. He showed me how to handle tools, how to stay disciplined, how to treat people with respect, and how to always keep your word. We'd spend hours working on cars in the garage, fishing on weekends, and eating pizza while watching football. He never tried to pretend Mom's death didn't matter, and he never tried to fill that void with someone else. He made sure I knew he'd always be there for me no matter what. He never remarried, though after a few years he started dating casually. It was always younger women, and it never lasted long. I used to tease him about it, saying, "Dad, she's literally younger than I am." We'd laugh it off. I figured he'd earned the right to have some fun. He worked like a dog to build his company, and it was his money. Besides, for his age he looked good. He stayed in shape, dressed well, and had plenty of confidence. Women noticed him. But what truly defined my dad was how seriously he took loyalty. He always said, "Blood's thicker than water, Mikey. Family's all you've got in the end." I believed every single word. When I was 23 and didn't have much credit history, he helped me buy my house by co-signing the initial papers, though I paid every dime. I had a ton of respect for him. Turns out, you can be completely wrong about the people closest to you. This is where the nightmare really begins. About 3.5 years ago, I met a woman named Jessica at Murphy's Sports Bar, a low-key spot I'd visit after a long shift. Jessica was waitressing there, and she was absolutely stunning. Blonde, tall, curvy in all the right places, with a super cute, innocent face. Honestly, she felt way out of my league. But she noticed me. Every time I walked in, she made sure I got her section. She memorized my exact order, smiled warmly whenever she talked to me, and made things incredibly easy. She was 24, had gone to college for a bit but dropped out. She was always venting about how broke she was, her crushing student debt, her tiny apartment with 3 terrible roommates, and her unreliable car. She had that struggling, pretty girl energy that makes hardworking guys want to step in and fix everything. I felt terrible for her. Here she was, beautiful and kind, busting her tail for cheap tips while I had a steady, solid income. I started tipping her extra, like $20 on a $15 bill, and offered to help whenever she mentioned car troubles. "You don't have to do that," she'd say, but she never actually turned the money down. After a couple of months, I asked her out. We went to a nice Italian restaurant, caught a movie, and the chemistry was undeniable. Within 6 weeks, she was practically living at my place. Her lease was ending, she was stressed and trying to be a good guy. I told her she could crash with me temporarily to save up money and get back on her feet. That short-term plan turned into a miserable 3-year freeloading nightmare. Roughly 2 weeks after moving in, she suddenly quit her job at Murphy's. She claimed the environment was toxic, the customers were creeps, and her manager didn't back her up. She told me, "I just need some space to figure out my life. I can't think straight when I'm this overwhelmed." At the time, I was pulling in about $178,000 a year with abundant overtime. I figured I could cover things for a little while until she landed something better. But she never did. Jessica didn't pitch in a single dime for 3 straight years. I covered absolutely everything: housing costs, electric bills, groceries, gas, her car payments, cell phone, clothing, and luxury entertainment. Her lifestyle became a laughable insult to my hard work. Most mornings, she wouldn't crawl out of bed until close to noon, while I was up before sunrise heading out to a freezing, grueling job site. I'd spend my day elbows deep in busted diesel engines and toxic hydraulic fluid, coming home sore, filthy, and entirely wiped out around 6 p.m. Meanwhile, she'd still be in her pajamas, lounging on my couch, binge-watching Netflix. "How was your day, baby?" she'd ask, her eyes completely glued to the screen, not even bothering to hit pause. She constantly claimed she was applying for jobs, but I never saw a single interview lined up. At the same time, she was blowing through my hard-earned paychecks like it was Monopoly money. Amazon packages landed on our porch daily. Makeup, clothes, expensive designer handbags that cost more than what I earned in a week. Pricey skincare routines, gym outfits she never wore, and random decorative crap that cluttered up my house. When I'd ask what was for dinner, she'd act like I was speaking a foreign language. "I don't know, what do you feel like making?" "There's stuff in the fridge," she'd reply. So, after putting in a brutal 10-hour physical shift, I would come home and cook for us both while she flipped through TV shows. She never offered to cook, never suggested ordering takeout with her own non-existent money, and always had an excuse whenever I brought up employment. She blamed anxiety, burnout, and a bad economy, but she had absolutely no issue telling me how to spend my money. She constantly nagged me to trade in my reliable 2018 truck for something newer and flashier. She said we needed to upgrade all the furniture because mine looked too much like a single guy's place. She kept demanding exotic vacations to Cancun, Hawaii, and Paris, acting like we were rolling in millions. When I explained that it wasn't doable on a single income, she'd throw a massive temper tantrum and start sulking. "All my friends' boyfriends treat them better," she'd whine. Sarah's guy just surprised her with a $500 purse. Ashley's fiancé flew her to Europe. Maybe their boyfriends weren't covering 100% of their living expenses while they sat at home doing nothing. I should have said that out loud, but I didn't because I thought I was deeply in love. I wanted her to be happy, so I picked up every single extra shift available. Saturdays, Sundays, late nights, I was running myself straight into the ground just to fund the luxury lifestyle she felt entitled to. She hosted her friends at our house without telling me, letting them drink my beer, eat my food, and use my streaming accounts. When I complained about being blindsided by loud guests after a 12-hour workday, she turned it back on me, calling me antisocial and ruining her social life. The absolute truth is, the physical side of our relationship was the only thing keeping me blind. Our intimacy was incredible. She was adventurous, enthusiastic, and made me feel like an absolute king. But looking back, it was entirely strategic. As long as I was completely satisfied in bed, she knew I wouldn't ask hard questions about how one-sided the rest of our life was. I was being systematically taken advantage of by a master manipulator, and I was too kind, too green, and too exhausted to catch on. About a year into living together, I figured it was time for Jessica to finally meet my dad. She had been begging for it, claiming it was deeply important that my family accepted her. My dad had also been asking about the woman I was spending all my time with. The massive red flags were right there, but I completely missed them. Jessica, who never bothered dressing up for anything, not even for a nice date night with me, spent 3 full hours getting ready to meet my father. She curled her hair perfectly, put on a full face of heavy makeup, wore tight jeans that left absolutely nothing to the imagination, and a top cut low enough to draw immediate attention. She looked like she was headed straight to a high-end nightclub, not a casual family dinner. When I gently asked why she went all out, she snapped at me defensively, So now you're ashamed of how I dress. I thought you'd be proud to show me off. I just want your dad to like me. I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. But my gut twisted. That night, my dad came over to my house. I made steaks, baked potatoes, the whole deal. The very second he walked through the front door, Jessica's personality changed completely. Normally, she was quite shy and reserved around new people, but around my dad, she was the exact opposite. Bubbly, highly animated, and practically glued to every single word he said. She hung on to his stories, laughed loudly at every single dumb joke, and peppered him with endless questions about his business. I couldn't believe my eyes. She never cared about my work. If I tried telling her about the heavy machinery I repaired, she'd tune out within 2 minutes. Now, she was suddenly fascinated by commercial plumbing contracts and small business management strategy. That's so incredibly impressive, Robert, she kept gushing, laying it on unbelievably thick. You must be really brilliant to build a whole company from the ground up. My dad was absolutely loving it. He always loved being the center of attention, especially when a young, attractive girl was involved. He started showing off, cracking more jokes, and practically glowing under her intense attention. At one point, he gave her a slick wink and said, "So, this is the woman who's turned my son into a total homebody. You must be quite the catch." Jessica blushed and let out this weird, high-pitched giggle I had never heard from her before. "Mike's incredible," she replied, looking at my dad. "I'm just lucky to have someone so dependable and grounded." She put an extra strange emphasis on the word grounded, like it was a polite way of calling me boring. All through dinner, she gushed over his expensive watch, his custom truck, his beautiful lake house, and his business advice. She was leaning in close toward him when he spoke, twirling her hair and adjusting her shirt. Later, after he left, I brought it up. "You were kind of different tonight. Flirty. You were really laying it on thick." She instantly exploded into anger. "I was just being friendly. Isn't that what you wanted? His opinion matters if this relationship is going anywhere." It sounded reasonable on the surface, but my instincts knew better. Then the patterns changed. My dad started stopping by my house way more than usual. He'd never been a guy to randomly drop by, but now he was there almost weekly with flimsy excuses. He needed to borrow a specific wrench, wanted help moving something light, or just wanted to check on the house. The funny thing? He only ever showed up when Jessica was home alone, never when she was out. He suddenly took a massive interest in house projects. He wanted to help replace light fixtures, check out the plumbing, and fix up the landscaping. "Good bonding time, Mikey," he'd tell me. Besides, Jessica mentioned she'd love to see the backyard fixed up. That was complete news to me. Jessica had never mentioned a single thing about the yard to me. So, we spent weekends working on my house, putting in a brand new deck, updating the bathroom, and planting shrubs. Jessica was always nearby, wearing tiny tank tops and short shorts that showed a massive amount of skin. She claimed it was just because of the summer heat. But I caught the way my dad looked at her. They weren't casual glances. They were long, lingering, hungry stares that made me intensely uncomfortable, especially when she bent over right in front of him. When I mentioned it to her later, she shrugged it off carelessly. "Older guys just notice beauty more, Mike. It's no big deal. He's probably just remembering what it felt like to be young." It should have been my 51st warning sign, but I ignored it. After 2 full years of living together and covering 100% of her expenses, I decided it was time to propose. Jessica had been dropping massive hints, leaving bridal magazines open on the kitchen counter and showing me engagement rings online. "Ashley's ring is stunning," she'd say, waving her phone in my face. "She's so lucky. I want something just like that." She made it clear that small rings looked cheap and that she'd be deeply humiliated to wear something basic. "One look at a woman's engagement ring should tell you exactly how much her man values her," she once told me. "A cheap ring screams you're not worth it." I wanted to prove her worth, so I saved aggressively and spent a ridiculous $7,500 on a flawless 1.5-carat diamond solitaire from a highly reputable jeweler in town. I proposed on our 2-year anniversary at a beautiful lakeside restaurant with a perfect sunset view. When dessert came, I got down on one knee and she started crying happy tears, loudly saying yes and kissing me passionately in front of the entire dining room. Within an hour, she had posted it all over social media, calling everyone she knew to show off the rock. That's when the financial demands escalated into absolute insanity. Jessica threw herself into wedding planning like it was a high-paying corporate job, and everything on her wish list was top dollar. She demanded an extravagant wedding venue that charged a staggering $140,000 just for the booking. She wanted designer bouquets, a custom-tailored gown, luxury photography, and gourmet catering. When I tried to bring her down to reality and talk about a realistic budget, she completely exploded into a screaming fit. "This is the single biggest day of my life," she shrieked. "Don't you love me enough to give me the wedding I've dreamed of? I don't want people whispering that our wedding looked cheap. I deserve the absolute best." To pay for her dream, I worked like a literal madman. I picked up every single extra shift, worked every Saturday and volunteered for holidays. I was pulling 70-hour weeks, coming home entirely broken down and exhausted, just to fund this massive illusion. Meanwhile, Jessica was still not working a single hour, still blowing cash on my credit cards and still sleeping in until noon. Then her relationship with my dad took a bizarre turn. She suddenly treated him like her personal wedding guru. She'd call him to discuss flower arrangements, reception layouts, and cake options. "Your dad has amazing taste," she'd tell me. "He really knows how to make things look elegant." It made zero sense. My dad got married once 25 years ago at a basic courthouse. What did he know about floral design? But she acted like he was a top-tier luxury consultant. Next thing I knew, my dad was coming over to the house constantly while I was away at work, spending hours alone with her under the guise of wedding planning. When I'd ask what they discussed, she'd just shrug it off. "Just boring wedding stuff, baby. You don't care about seating charts, do you?" Then her personal habits shifted. She suddenly started hopping into the shower right before I arrived home from work every single evening. She began doing her own laundry separately, which was brand new since she usually dumped it all on me. Her phone was completely glued to her body 24/7. She would tilt the screen away instantly if I walked into the room, claiming it was just her sister texting about the guest list, and then she'd immediately delete the entire conversation thread. She suddenly developed a fierce obsession with fitness, buying a high-priced gym membership and hiring a handsome personal trainer. "I want to look amazing in my wedding dress," she said. She started going to the gym for 3 hours a day, coming home dripping in sweat, glowing, and posting endless gym selfies, while our kitchen remained a complete mess. The final 6 months were a blinding blur of massive red flags. Her schedule became completely impossible to track. She'd claim she was out dress shopping for hours but would return home entirely empty-handed. She'd say she was meeting with caterers but couldn't remember a single dish on the menu. If I asked a single follow-up question, she'd snap viciously, "Why don't you trust me? Do you think I'm lying to you?" My dad's behavior was equally unhinged. He started calling my house's landline middle of the day, specifically knowing I would be miles away on a construction site, just to talk to Jessica for hours. Every single instinct in my body was flashing a bright, burning red, but I refused to believe what my gut already knew. I was terrified of the truth, so I forced myself to believe I was just being paranoid. I told myself my dad would never cross that line. He raised me. He loved me. Family came first. I was a complete idiot. The day everything blew completely apart is seared permanently into my brain. It was early March, a Saturday afternoon I will never forget. I was working mandatory overtime for Morrison Construction on a massive highway contract. We were running tight on a state deadline, so it was an all-hands-on-deck weekend with double pay on the table. I was on site by 6 a.m., covered in grease, repairing a massive excavator that had suffered a catastrophic hydraulic failure. Jessica knew my exact schedule. I had told her the night before that I wouldn't be home until at least 9 p.m. She told me she was planning a relaxing girls' day out with her sister, Amy, shopping, lunch, and a salon visit. By 1 p.m., our crew got ahead of schedule. The replacement parts arrived early, the repair went flawlessly, and our foreman, Dave, clapped his hands and said, "Let's call it early, boys. Go enjoy the rest of your Saturday." I was exhausted but incredibly happy. I was going to get full double pay, and I suddenly had a completely free afternoon. I figured I'd drive straight home and surprise Jessica, catch her before she got deep into her afternoon plans, and treat her to a nice lunch. But as I pulled onto my quiet street around 1:45 p.m., a heavy, dark feeling dropped into my stomach. Jessica's white Honda was sitting right there in the driveway. That was strange enough, but parked right behind it, completely blocking her car in, was a massive, highly familiar black F-150 King Ranch. My dad's truck. I knew it anywhere: the custom rims, the heavy window tint, and the large gold Chen's plumbing decal blasted on the side. What on earth was my father doing parked at my house in the middle of a Saturday afternoon when I was supposed to be trapped on a job site until midnight? I sat in my truck for a moment, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, trying desperately to engineer a normal explanation. Maybe the plumbing broke. Maybe she felt sick. But deep down, the lies were completely over. I stepped out of my truck, walked up the porch, and unlocked my front door as quietly as possible. The house downstairs was dead silent, except for unmistakable loud rhythmic noises echoing down from upstairs, from the exact direction of my master bedroom. Sounds I knew all too well. My stomach completely flipped, and my hands began to tremble with a wild, blinding rage. I wanted to sprint up those stairs, kick the door down, and tear the place apart, but a cold, hard survival instinct suddenly froze me in place. I needed proof. Definitive, unassailable, legal proof that they could never twist, lie, or gaslight their way out of. I sat down, slipped off my heavy work boots to avoid making a sound on the hardwood floors, pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I crept up the stairs, step by step, as the noises grew louder, clearer, and entirely undeniable. The bedroom door was pushed wide open. They weren't even trying to be discreet because they thought I was trapped in the mud miles away. And there it was. The absolute destruction of my life. The man who raised me after my mother died, the man who taught me how to throw a football, build a career, and live with integrity was in my bed. The woman I was set to marry in less than 2 months, the one I had supported completely for 3 years while destroying my own body with 70-hour weeks, the woman wearing the $7,500 diamond ring I bought her, was riding my father. It wasn't some quick, detached mistake. She was into it with a passion I had never once seen her display with me. She was throwing her head back, moaning things that made my blood run completely cold. "Oh God, you feel so much better than him," she gasped out, gripping his shoulders. "I wasted 3 whole years faking it with that little boy when I could have had a real man." My dad laughed, a low, cocky, satisfied chuckle, and grabbed her tightly. "He's completely clueless, Jess," he sneered, kissing her neck. "The poor kid actually thinks he's marrying someone loyal. What a total idiot." Jessica's loud, mocking laugh cut through the room like shattered glass. Hearing her laugh at me, at my sacrifice, at my sweat, at my blind love, completely killed the last remaining bit of my naivety. The trembling stopped. The heartbreak died. In its place, a freezing, immovable calculation took over. I held the phone perfectly steady, tilted it around the doorframe, and recorded for exactly 42 seconds. I got my dad's face clearly in the frame. I got Jessica's face. I got the silver necklace I bought her for Christmas swinging back and forth, and I got a perfect, glistening shot of my $7,500 diamond engagement ring on her finger. When I pressed stop, I didn't scream. I didn't storm in and swing. My dad was a large guy, and I spent my days lifting heavy iron, so a physical fight would have sent someone to jail or the hospital, and I was not going to get a criminal record for 2 parasites. I quietly tucked the phone into my pocket, walked back down the stairs in my socks, and stepped out onto the front porch into the crisp March air. My house. My garage. My life. They had turned it into a massive joke, but the punchline was about to change. I walked down the driveway, opened the utility box on my truck, and pulled out my heavy-duty mechanics tool set. I walked straight over to my dad's precious F-150 King Ranch. I didn't smash the windows. Insurance covers vandalism, and that's amateur work. Instead, I pulled out a valve stem core remover tool. One by one, I unscrewed the tiny valve cores from all 4 of his massive custom tires. I stood there calmly, listening to the loud, violent hiss of air escaping as the heavy $80,000 truck slowly collapsed flat onto its rims. I tossed the tiny metal cores deep into the bushes across the street. He wasn't driving out of here, and a simple tire pump couldn't save him. Next, I walked over to Jessica's white Honda, which was blocking him in. I pulled out my heavy industrial tow straps from my truck bed, the massive, reinforced ones we use at Morrison Construction to pull heavy equipment components. I crawled underneath her car, hooked one end securely to her rear axle, and attached the other to my heavy-duty truck hitch. I jumped into my driver's seat, slammed it into 4 low and hit the gas. My tires dug into the asphalt, and I dragged her Honda sideways across the concrete driveway, wedging it at a horrific, impossible angle right against the concrete retaining wall. She was completely pinned, and my dad's truck was entirely trapped. Neither of them could move an inch without scraping the entire passenger side of his truck to absolute pieces. With the perimeter secured, I walked back into the house, stepped into my heavy steel-toed work boots and marched up the stairs. This time I didn't tread lightly. My heavy boots pounded violently against the hardwood, a loud, echoing countdown to their judgment day. The noises upstairs ceased instantly. "Mike." Jessica's voice echoed out, suddenly high-pitched, sharp, and laced with immediate panic. "Is that you?" I threw the bedroom door open so hard it slammed against the drywall, leaving a massive dent. The scene was utterly pathetic. My dad was frantically scrambling to pull up his jeans, nearly tripping over his own boots, his face a deep, horrific shade of crimson. Jessica was clutching my heavy down comforter tightly to her bare chest, her eyes wide with terror, her hair a disheveled mess. "Mikey," my dad stammered, raising his hands in the air, trying desperately to assume that authoritative, paternal tone he'd used to control me my entire life. "Look, son, it's not what it looks like. Just calm down. Let's go downstairs and talk about this like men." "Shut up, Robert," I said. My voice was incredibly low, flat, and entirely devoid of human emotion. Hearing me call him by his first name froze him completely solid. He searched my face for tears for a breakdown, but he only saw the cold, analyzing stare of a technician looking at a shattered piece of scrap metal. "Mike, baby, please?" Jessica instantly shrieked, the fake waterworks turning on in a desperate flash. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to look helpless. "She made me do it. I mean, he forced himself on me. He's been threatening me for months, Mike. He said he'd take the house away from us if I didn't comply with him." "I have the entire video, Jessica," I interrupted, pulling my phone from my pocket and lighting up the screen so the image reflected clearly in her wide eyes. "I stood right outside that door for 2 minutes. I heard every single word that came out of your mouth. I heard exactly what you thought about faking it for 3 years. I heard you laugh at me." The fake tears vanished instantly. Her face went entirely pale, her jaw dropping. My dad looked like he had just been handed a death sentence. "You're going to delete that right now," my dad said, stepping forward, his chest puffing out as he tried to intimidate me. "You are not going to ruin my reputation in this town over a mistake, Mike. I co-signed for this house, remember? Half of this property is legally mine." "Actually, Robert, you co-signed the loan," I replied, taking a massive step forward, completely towering over him. Working in heavy construction field labor had packed me with dense muscle that golf and lakehouse living couldn't match. "But if you remember your own financial advice, I paid off the entire principal balance 3 months ago using my overtime savings and equipment bonuses. The deed is entirely in my name. Your name is nowhere on the title. You have zero legal rights to this property. You are currently trespassing in my home." He blinked, his mouth opening and closing, realizing his immense arrogance had blinded him to the legal reality. I turned my eyes to Jessica. "You have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house. Anything left behind after 10 minutes goes directly into the fire pit in the backyard. Move." "Mike, you can't do this to me. I have absolutely nowhere to go," she screamed, dropping the helpless act entirely, her voice turning sharp, vicious, and ugly. "I don't have a job because of you. You kept me trapped here." 10 minutes, I stated coldly, hitting the timer on my phone and placing it face up on the dresser. 9 minutes and 59 seconds. She realized I wasn't bluffing. She bolted from the bed, wrapping a stray sheet around herself, and began wildly throwing clothes into a plastic laundry basket, screaming a torrent of vile curses at me. She called me a loser, a stupid grease monkey, a boring kid who never deserved a woman like her anyway. I didn't even blink. Every single insult that flew out of her mouth just made me realize how incredibly cheap she actually was, and how lucky I was to find out today rather than at an altar in front of 200 people. My dad tried to push past my shoulder to get to the hallway. "This is incredibly low, Mike. Family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't screw their son's fiancée in his own bed, Robert," I said, my voice cutting through his nonsense like a blade. "Get your shoes and get out." Watching the great, wealthy, untouchable Robert Chin, the grand blueprint of the American dream, clutching his unbuttoned shirt and shuffling down my stairs in his socks was one of the most profoundly satisfying sights of my life. When they stepped out onto the driveway, the real comedy began. My dad saw his truck resting flat on 4 rims and let out a roar of absolute fury. "What the hell did you do to my truck?" "Drop the pressure, Robert. Just like you dropped your standards," I shouted down from the porch. Jessica ran to her Honda, threw her laundry basket into the back seat, and slammed the car into reverse, only to realize her car was completely wedged sideways, pinning my dad's truck tightly against the concrete wall. They were completely stuck. Right there, in plain, open view of the entire neighborhood. My dad's phone started ringing loudly. It was his custom King Ranch digital alert system letting him know his tire pressure had dropped to 0. He pulled it out, his face a dark shade of purple, screaming curses into the afternoon air while Jessica slammed her hands against her steering wheel, crying real tears of frustration because she couldn't escape. I didn't stay to watch them figure it out. I walked back inside my house, stripped the sheets and the comforter completely off my bed, carried them down to the backyard fire pit, tossed them into the dirt and lit a match. I watched the expensive fabrics burn, the thick black smoke rising up into the Ohio sky, taking 3 years of absolute lies along with it. But I wasn't done. The emotional eviction was over, but the strategic takedown was just beginning. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table with a hot cup of black coffee and my laptop. I didn't post the video to social media. That would be messy and a lawyer would tell me it could complicate things. Instead, I made 3 exact copies of the file onto secure, encrypted flash drives. The first flash drive went into a sealed envelope addressed directly to my dad's primary corporate business partner, a highly conservative investor named Richard who took personal reputation incredibly seriously. Richard handles all the major commercial municipal contracts for Chen's Plumbing, and those city contracts have a strict morality and leadership conduct clause. The second flash drive went to my aunt, my mom's older sister Helen. She was the matriarch of our family and fiercely kept the memory of my mother alive. She had been highly suspicious of my dad's casual dating habits for years. The third flash drive remained locked safely inside my heavy gun safe. On Monday morning, I walked straight into the office of the absolute best family law attorney in the county. I laid out the exact timeline, the co-signing documents, and the proof of my complete financial independence. I wanted to ensure there were absolutely no lingering legal or financial ties to Robert Chen. While I was sitting in that lawyer's office, my phone began exploding with notifications. First, it was Aunt Helen. She had received the video via a private cloud link I sent her Sunday evening. The pure fury in her voice was monumental. She told me she was calling an immediate emergency family meeting and that my dad was officially dead to her entire side of the family. The Lake Erie house, which my mother had worked to help build before she got sick. Aunt Helen was already consulting a high-profile probate lawyer to see if any of my late mother's unallocated estate could be legally clawed back from his accounts. Next came a wave of frantic texts from my dad. "Mike, call me right now. Richard just called me into the main office. What the hell did you do? You're ruining the entire business. This company supports both of us, you idiot." I replied with a single, final text message. "Blood's thicker than water, Robert. Family's all you've got in the end. Good luck." I blocked his number permanently. Jessica tried texting me from her sister Amy's phone, spinning a wild story about how she was confused, how my dad had manipulated her by promising to pay off her entire student debt if she complied with his business advice. I blocked that number too. It's been 2 months now. The original wedding date came and went. Instead of standing at an expensive altar in a $140,000 venue paying for a massive fraud, I spent that Saturday in my double garage, completely rebuilding the engine on an old '67 Mustang I bought with the exact cash I saved from canceling the wedding caterers. My hands were covered in black grease, country music was playing loudly, and for the first time in 3 long years, the air inside my house felt completely clean. My dad's business took a catastrophic hit. Richard pulled his investment out of their commercial expansion, and the city officially refused to renew Chen's plumbing maintenance contract for the upcoming fiscal year, citing extreme leadership instability. My dad had to sell his prized King Ranch truck just to cover the monthly overhead for his remaining service vehicles. He's currently stuck at his lake house completely alone, his private dock empty, realizing too late that the idiot kid he mocked was the only person who actually kept his secrets. Jessica is back to living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, working an entry-level retail job, and dealing with aggressive collection agencies for the designer bags she bought on credit cards I've since reported as unauthorized users. They thought they could build their twisted happiness right on my back while I worked myself to death in the dirt. But the thing about heavy equipment technicians is, we know exactly how to handle a wrecking ball. They broke my trust, but I decided exactly what it was going to cost them. And in the end they paid full price.